Have you ever walked into a crowded party and felt utterly alone? Have you ever looked around and realized that even though you're surrounded by people, none of them truly see you? Have you ever tried to explain something important to someone and felt like you were speaking a language that no one else understood? If you answered yes to any of those questions, you might be what Carl Jung called an old soul. And Huberman's neuroscience has recently uncovered why your brain functions differently, why you experience a loneliness that others simply can't comprehend. Because the truth no one tells you is this: the loneliness you feel isn't about being physically alone. It's about something much deeper, something that Jung mapped out over a century ago, and that Huberman has validated with cutting-edge technology in 2024. And when you understand what's really happening in your brain, you'll finally comprehend why you felt different your entire life. And more importantly, you'll understand that this isn't a curse, it's a sign. Jung wrote something in his memoirs that few psychologists quote. He said that since childhood he felt alone, and continued to feel that way his entire life. Not because he didn't have people around him, but because he knew things that others apparently didn't know, and even more disturbingly, things that others didn't want to know. Think about that for a second. The greatest psychologist of the 20th century admitted that loneliness accompanied him from childhood to death. And he explained exactly why. Jung said that loneliness doesn't come from not having people around. Loneliness comes from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to yourself, or from sustaining certain views that others consider inadmissible. That's exactly what old souls experience. They see the world in a different way. They perceive things that others ignore. They ask themselves questions that others avoid. And when they try to share these perceptions, they encounter empty stares, disinterest, even hostility. And that creates a specific type of loneliness. A loneliness that can't be cured simply by being around people. Because the problem isn't the absence of bodies, it's the absence of real connection. But hold on. Because what Huberman discovered about this will shock you even more. Dr. K. Tai, a neuroscientist at the Salk Institute, appeared on the Huberman Lab podcast in February of 2024. And what she revealed completely changed the way we understand loneliness. She discovered what she called loneliness neurons, specific cells located in the dorsal raphe nucleus of the brain. And here's the surprising part. These neurons are a type of dopamine neuron, but unlike traditional dopamine neurons that stimulate reward-seeking behavior, these neurons produce the opposite effect. When activated, they create an aversive signal, a discomfort, a pain, and that pain is what we experience as loneliness. But here's what connects directly with young and old souls. These neurons don't just fire when we're physically isolated. They fire when there's a discrepancy between the type of connection we need and the type of connection we have. Remember what Jung said? Loneliness comes from being unable to communicate the things that seem important. That's exactly what neuroscience is showing. The loneliness neurons don't measure how many people are around you. They measure the quality of the connection, the depth, the authenticity, and for old souls, who operate on a level of depth that most people avoid. Almost every social interaction activates these neurons, because almost no social interaction reaches the level of connection that their brain is seeking. Huberman explained this through the concept of social homeostasis. Just like your body has a thermostat for temperature, your brain has a thermostat for social connection, and that thermostat is calibrated individually. For most people, superficial conversations about the weather, gossip, discussions about celebrities satisfy the need for social connection. The thermostat is satisfied. The loneliness neurons stay quiet. But for old souls, the thermostat is calibrated differently. It requires deep connection, discussions about the meaning of life, exploration of complex ideas, authentic vulnerability. And when these needs aren't met, the loneliness neurons fire, even if the person is surrounded by hundreds of people. And that's why old souls can feel more alone at a party than alone at home. At home, At least there isn't the torture of being near connection without being able to access it. Now I'm going to reveal something that Jung mapped out and that few psychologists discuss openly. The archetype of the wanderer. Jung identified that there's a specific archetypal pattern associated with souls who feel displaced. He called it the wanderer or wayfarer. And this archetype carries a characteristic that he called far sickness, a longing for distant places, a deep yearning for a home that seems to exist nowhere. The wanderer appears as a figure of profound loneliness, drifting through life without a fixed home or direction, restlessly searching for purpose and belonging. He has this wanderlust, a deep desire for distant places, and the hope of eventually finding a place on earth where he truly feels at home. This describes exactly the experience of old souls. They aren't just physically displaced. They're existentially displaced. They feel like they came from somewhere else, that they belong to some other time, that they speak a language that few others speak. And neuroscience explains why. Studies from 2024 show that chronic loneliness is associated with specific changes in the default mode network. That's the brain network that processes internal narratives, sense of identity, and daydreams. Lonely people show increased activity in the default mode network and fewer interconnections between this network and other brain networks. This means that they spend more time in their inner world and less time synchronized with the outside world for old souls. This isn't necessarily a problem, it's an adaptation. The inner world is richer, deeper, more satisfying than the outer world that offers only superficial connections. The brain adapts by withdrawing resources from social interactions that don't satisfy and investing in the inner world that at least offers some level of depth. But here's where the revelation gets even deeper. Jung didn't see the loneliness of the old soul as purely negative. He saw it as necessary for the process of individuation. Jung was explicit about this. Individuation requires self-sufficiency, independence of mind, and the ability to separate from the crowd and follow your own path. It's a path that repeatedly confronts you with the isolation that comes with heightened awareness, with knowing more than those around you. Jung wrote in his memoirs that the consequence of his decision to follow his internal images was extreme solitude. He was describing the price of individuation, the price of becoming who you really are, instead of who society wants you to be. It's almost as if loneliness is the price demanded by the gods from those with whom they share some, especially hidden. Understanding, solitude becomes the school where you are forced to learn to endure your own uniqueness as an individual. But hold on, because there's an even deeper layer that I need to reveal to you. There's another archetype that Jung associated with this experience of profound solitude, the archetype of the orphan. The orphan is an enigma, as a representative of a numinous kind of loneliness. The orphan is both special and rejected. There's a sanctity in their state of exile, and once redeemed, they represent the true incarnation of the self. Huberman, a Jungian psychologist who worked extensively with individuation, said something profound about this. She said that individuation begins with the painful recognition that we are all orphans, and the liberating recognition that the entire world is our orphanage. This means that the loneliness that old souls feel isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's the entry price for individuation. It's the sign that you are on the right path. Dr. Andrew Huberman would add a neuroscientific perspective to this. When the loneliness neurons fire consistently over time, they create changes in the brain. Studies from 2023 show that prolonged social isolation is associated with lower brain volume in areas like the hippocampus and the amygdala. But this isn't necessarily destruction. It could be reorganization. The brain is redirecting resources from superficial social processing to other functions. Functions that might include the depth of thought, creativity, and insight that are characteristic of old souls. Now let me tell you about the theory of social homeostasis that Dr. K. Tai developed. This connects directly with why old souls eventually stop trying to connect. The theory suggests that isolated creatures eventually stop trying to make new connections when their efforts consistently aren't rewarded. It's as if the brain says, "It's not worth it." For old souls, this happens early in life. They try to share their deep thoughts. They're rejected or misunderstood. They try again. More rejection. Eventually, the brain learns that the effort isn't worth the reward, and it stops trying. This explains why many old souls become introverted, not because they were born that way, but because they've learned that the social world doesn't offer what they need. And the brain, being efficient, stops wasting energy on fruitless searches. But here is the paradox that Jung pointed out. The self doesn't emerge in isolation, but in relationship. It manifests through our actions, each of which forms a bridge between ourselves and the world around us. The self is, therefore, fundamentally relational. This means that old souls can't simply withdraw completely. They need connection, but not just any connection. Connection with other old souls. Connection with people who operate on the same level of depth. And this is where the practical advice becomes crucial. If you're an old soul who feels chronically lonely, the solution isn't to force more superficial social interactions. That's only going to activate your loneliness neurons more. The solution is to find your tribe, to find other people who also speak your language. Huberman suggests that the quality of social connections is more important than the quantity. A single, deep relationship can satisfy social needs better than dozens of superficial ones. For old souls, this is especially true. Finding one or two people who really understand you can completely change your life experience. It can finally silence the loneliness neurons that have been firing for decades. But Jung would add an even deeper layer. He'd say that the work of individuation includes developing a deep relationship with yourself, knowing your own unconscious, dialoguing with your internal parts, integrating your shadow. When an old soul does this inner work, something interesting happens. The loneliness changes its quality. It stops being a painful wound and becomes a door to profundity, a space of creativity, a laboratory of transformation. Jung said that he himself went through this during his period of confrontation with the unconscious. Between 1913 and 1917, he experienced extreme loneliness. But from that solitude emerged the ideas that defined all of analytical psychology. The loneliness was the crucible where the gold was refined. Now I'm going to reveal something that few psychologists discuss. The difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the suffering of being separated. It's when the loneliness neurons fire and you feel pain. It's aversive. It's something you want to escape from. Solitude is the choice to be alone. It's when you deliberately withdraw from the social noise to access inner depth. It's when the old soul finally stops trying to be understood by the world and comes home to themselves. Jung practiced solitude deliberately. He had a tower in Bollingen where he spent long periods alone, not escaping from loneliness, but choosing the silence necessary to hear the internal voices. And this is what old souls need to learn to do. Transform imposed loneliness into chosen solitude. Stop suffering for not fitting in. And start celebrating the uniqueness that allows access to depths that others will never know. Huberman offers specific practices for this. He talks about NSDR, non-sleep deep rest, as a way to access deep states of consciousness. He talks about meditation, about journaling, all practices that a person does alone, but that don't create loneliness. They create connection with yourself. For old souls, these practices aren't optional extras. They're fundamental needs. They're the way to nurture a brain that's famished for depth in a world that offers only superficiality. But there's one last revelation that I need to share, and it's perhaps the most important of all. Jung said something that few psychologists quote. He said that whoever looks outside dreams, Gindi, but whoever looks inside awakens. This phrase summarizes the journey of the old soul. Most people spend their lives looking outward, seeking external validation, trying to fit in, consuming entertainment, avoiding the silence within. But old souls are called to look inward. And this internal gaze is what creates the sensation of displacement. Because when you start to awaken, you realize that you were dreaming along with everyone else. And now you're awake. In a world of sleepwalkers. This is the curse and the blessing of the old soul. You see more, you feel more, you know more, and that separates you. But it also connects you with something larger and with the deep current of life that most people never access. The loneliness neurons will continue firing. That's inevitable in a world that wasn't built for old souls. But you can learn to hear those neurons differently, not as torture, but as a reminder. A reminder that you're made for depth. A reminder that your search for real connection is valid. A reminder that somewhere, other old souls are also awake, also searching, also waiting to find you. This is the truth that Jung mapped out, and Huberman has validated. The loneliness of the old soul isn't a disease to be cured. It's a calling to be answered, a calling to become who you really are, even if that means walking alone for a while, even if that means being misunderstood, even if that means carrying the burden of knowledge that others don't want to bear. But let me reveal something even deeper to you, something that few talk about regarding old souls. There's a reason why old souls appear in certain eras and places. Jung believed that the collective unconscious sends certain souls to fulfill specific functions in the evolution of humanity, souls that carry visions that humanity isn't yet ready to receive, souls that plant seeds that will only germinate generations later. And this is the heaviest burden. Knowing something important, seeing something crucial, and not being able to communicate it, because the world hasn't yet developed the concepts necessary to understand. Jung experienced this personally. Many of his ideas were ridiculed in his time. Synchronicity, the collective unconscious, archetypes. Today, these ideas are widely accepted. But Jung had to carry the loneliness of knowing before everyone else. And that is what it means to be an old soul. You carry knowledge from other eras, perhaps past lives, perhaps a connection with the collective unconscious, perhaps simply a brain configured to see patterns that others don't see. And this knowledge isolates you, because you can't pretend not to know. You can't go back to being naive. You can't participate in the collective illusions that keep most people comfortably numb. Huberman would explain this in terms of neuroplasticity. Once certain neural connections are formed, they can't be undone easily. Once you see the world in a certain way, you can't unsee that vision. The brain has been permanently altered, and that's why old souls can't simply decide to be normal. It's not a choice. It's a neurological configuration, a way of processing information that has been shaped over years, perhaps decades, of experience and reflection. But here's the good news. This neurological configuration that creates loneliness also creates unique capabilities. Studies show that people with a more active default mode network tend to be more creative. They make connections between ideas that others don't. They see patterns in chaos. They generate insights that seem to come from nowhere. This is exactly what old souls experience. That feeling of knowing something without knowing how you know. That intuition that proves correct repeatedly. That ability to see through the masks that people wear. It's not magic. It's neuroscience. It's a default mode network that has spent so much time in internal reflection that it has developed capabilities that most people never access. But this capability comes at a price, and the price is the difficulty of connecting with people who operate in a completely different mode. People whose default mode network is quieter, people who process the world more superficially, people who have never wondered why they exist or what happens after death. And that's why Jung said that individuation is a solitary path, not because you choose to be alone, but because few others are making the same journey. Few others are willing to confront the depths that you confront daily. Now let me tell you about a phenomenon that neuroscience is starting to validate. Neural synchronization between deeply connected people. Studies from 2024 show that when two people have a deep and meaningful conversation, their brainwaves begin to synchronize. Literally, the electrical patterns in one person's brain begin to mirror the patterns in the other's brain. This explains why deep connection is so satisfying for old souls. It's not just emotional, it's neurological. When you finally find someone who understands you, your brains literally come into tune. The loneliness neurons finally quiet down, because real connection has been established. But here's the problem. This synchronization requires that both people are operating at similar levels of depth. If one person is at the surface level and the other is at the deep level, the synchronization doesn't happen. The brains speak different languages, and that's why old souls can spend hours at a party and leave more lonely than they entered. No synchronization happened. The loneliness neurons fired continuously because the brain was searching for connection and finding only noise. But when an old soul finds another old soul, something magical happens. The synchronization is almost instantaneous. The conversation flows effortlessly. The hours pass like minutes. Both leave energized instead of drained. This is what you should seek. Not quantity of connections, quality. Not many people, the right people. And how do you find these people? Jung would say that you should follow your genuine interests. Go to the places where deep people gather, spiritual communities, philosophy study groups, art circles, meditation retreats. Not because you're seeking friends, but because you're following your own soul. And when you follow your own soul, you inevitably cross paths with other people who are doing the same. Huberman would add that you should create opportunities for deep conversations. Don't accept the social default of superficial chit-chat. Ask real questions, share real vulnerabilities, create space for others to do the same. This will push some people away, and that's okay. Those people weren't your tribe anyway. But it will also attract others, the right ones. People who are also waiting for permission to be real. People who are also tired of wearing masks. And each of those real connections is worth more than 100 superficial ones. Each neural synchronization is worth more than 1,000 likes on social media. This is the economy of the old soul. Less is more. Depth over breadth, quality over quantity. And when you embrace this economy, something interesting happens. The loneliness diminishes, not because you have more people, but because the few people you have really matter, really see you, really understand you. And in the moments between those connections, you have yourself, your rich inner world, your depth practices, your relationship with the unconscious that Jung mapped out. Because in the end, as Jung discovered, loneliness is the school where you learn to endure your own uniqueness. And from this school emerge the souls who change the world. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you identify as an old soul? Do you experience this loneliness amidst crowds? Tell me in the comments, what was the moment you realized you saw the world differently? Because this conversation is exactly the kind of deep connection that old souls need. Team necessary loneliness versus team avoidable loneliness. Do you believe old souls should try to adapt to the world, or should they embrace their difference? Tell me in the comments. And if this video touched something deep within you, consider supporting this work through Super Thanks. You've just discovered the connection between Huberman's loneliness neurons, Jung's wanderer archetype, and the neuroscience of the default mode network. You saw how social homeostasis explains why your brain works differently. Each revelation like this takes hours of research, connecting Jung with Huberman, connecting deep psychology with neuroscience. And when you click the golden heart, you're not just supporting me financially. You're saying, keep revealing what few people talk about. Keep building these bridges that help old souls understand themselves. Because the truth is, few channels speak to old souls. Most content is made for the masses, for those who want superficial entertainment. But this channel is different. It's made for those who seek depth, for those who are awake, for those who carry the weight of seeing what others don't. This work only continues with your support. And before I finish, let me give you one last piece of advice. Something that Jung said that changed the way I see loneliness. Jung said that loneliness isn't just an external condition, it's also an internal condition. You can be alone in a room and not feel lonely, or you can be in a crowd and feel the deepest loneliness possible. The difference is in the relationship you have with yourself. If you are at peace with who you are, the absence of others doesn't create pain, but if you reject yourself, no amount of people will fill the void. And that's why the work of individuation is so important for old souls, not because it will eliminate external loneliness, but because it transforms the experience of loneliness. When you become your own best friend, the absence of others becomes space, instead of emptiness, silence, instead of painful noise. Huberman would say that this involves regulating the nervous system, practices that calm the amygdala, practices that strengthen the prefrontal cortex, practices that create a stable neurological foundation from which you can operate, regardless of external circumstances. Breathing, meditation, adequate sleep, sun exposure, exercise. All these things seem simple, but they create the neurological foundation necessary for an old soul to thrive, because in the end, you can't control whether you'll find your tribe. You can't control whether the world will understand you. You can't control the loneliness neurons, but you can control your relationship with yourself. You can control your daily practices. You can control the depth of your inner world. And when you do that, loneliness changes in quality. It ceases to be a sentence and becomes a choice. It ceases to be a prison and becomes a sanctuary. This is the journey of the old soul. It's not eliminating loneliness. It's transforming it. It's not fitting into the world. It's creating your own inner world, so rich that the outer world becomes optional. Until the next video, where we'll continue unraveling the secrets that Jung mapped out and Huberman validated, the secrets that old souls need to know to navigate a world that wasn't built for them. Loneliness may be the school, but graduation is possible, and it happens when you finally understand who you are and stop apologizing for it.